Welcome to today's episode. We have Laura Bruner on with us, and this episode is so impactful. If you've ever wanted to know how you increase influence in not just your speaking and how you show up with clients, but also in your copy on your landing pages, then this is the episode for you. We get into how to build influence, the different keys, and cool conversation around all of it. It's not an episode to miss. Let's get into it right now. Hi, Laura. I'm so excited to have you today on the podcast. Let's start off with what you do.
My name is Laura, and I'm from Vulcan Consulting. I am someone who has taught psychology for about 2 decades. And in the last year, I've started translating that into deliverables for people who want to be more influential and ethically persuasive.
Let's talk about the ethically part of it. So tell us what that means.
I'm sure you have seen where people have tried to persuade you to buy something or do something, and you get that feeling in your gut like something's not right, or that pushy salesperson, the used car dealer kind of
Yeah.
concepts. When we look at persuasion, we always want to make sure techniques we're using, whatever principles we're accessing from behavioral research, that we do it in authentic ways. So that might involve, for example, some people like to use scarcity to
Mhm.
try to push people to move, to get them to act. And when we do that, we have to be really careful with scarcity that it's not just contrived. So
Yeah.
there'll be websites where you'll see that there's only this many left. And suddenly, 2 hours later, they have more. As soon as the one deal is over, suddenly there's more. So you don't ever want to be seen doing that. And the reason is not just for your own ethics, although obviously that is really important to many of us. But also, when you are unethical and you're caught, that will spread like wildfire all over. That will get spread, research shows, way more than any positive comments about you. In addition, if you have employees and you use techniques like this, what you tend to find is that the ethical employees over time will leave your organization and you're left with the less ethical folks. It just kind of spirals, and then you have issues in your own organization. So both for your own benefit and for the benefit of others, you always want to be ethical.
And then is it also a trust thing? Because I'm going to use an example.
Mhm.
So when you talk about that, it makes me think of Macy's. Macy's is one of those places where it's always a sale going on.
Mhm.
Different. I don't really shop at Macy's often. I don't love it. But if I go there and I see something, I'll just wait a few weeks because I know that in a few weeks I'll get it for half the price. And I
Mhm.
feel like as women entrepreneurs and building our courses, our coaching programs, if we use those tactics of scarcity, what happens is, and you do it enough, people just assume you're going to discount and they wait. Is that true?
Absolutely. So we change, it's like shifting baselines, right? And I
Yes.
think another example might be Kohl's.
Oh,
Kohl's does
yes.
the same thing, right?
Yes.
Where you always have a coupon and it'll be like, did you get 15 or 20 or 30% off? And it's almost always 30%
Yeah.
off, right? And people go in and sometimes they just get frustrated and they're just like, just tell me the real price, because then I got to sit there and do math. And that's another thing about persuasion that we know, the way our brains work is that we want the least amount of friction possible. So if
Yes.
we have to sit there and spend 3 seconds calculating what the actual price is, it actually makes it less likely that we're going to buy it. And people will get frustrated that, especially if you feel like the reason for it is just that they're doing it as a gimmick, as opposed to a real one-time kind of offer.
And then I like that you talked about reducing like the least amount of friction because I know that when we do a lot of our courses, our offers, all that, like even our landing pages, it's like just make it easy. You want them to take one action, don't confuse them. I would love to hear about how the brain works with that least amount of friction because I always think about what's happening inside the brain that really makes it that way. Because sometimes I'm like, I want options, but do I really? I don't know.
There is something called Hobson Plus One, which is this research that was discovered. Let's say you're a consultant or a coach, and what you really want is for that person to reach out to you so you can have a conversation and discuss what kinds of services you can provide. What often happens is, like you said, they'll have four different things. Here's a lead magnet over here,
Yep.
and here's a call to action that's a hard call to action. In other words, reach out to me, something that takes a little bit more from the person. And then maybe you have a soft call to action, and then you have another one down here, and then you have a pop-up window. The issue with that is they should be seeing the same thing, and it should be above the fold, like whatever that call to action is, should be at the screen before you do any scrolling. Then it should either travel with you or pop up on each level. So as you
Yeah.
scroll down. But the Hobson Plus One, for when someone's making a decision, let's say you have three different levels of service, that would be the ideal amount to put on your website. To have seven different options, people get decision fatigue.
Okay.
And having just one option is actually also usually not the best
Okay.
because now what's the other option? Either
Okay.
doing the thing or doing nothing, as opposed to doing the thing you really want them to do or doing a baby step. So maybe it's being added to the newsletter is your soft call to action, whereas your hard call is you want them to really reach out to you. But maybe they're not there yet. So then you have
Yeah.
the soft. By the way, when you do a Hobson Plus One,
Yeah.
you always want it to be in like the same category. It shouldn't be reach out to me or some other random thing that has nothing to do with getting your services. Make sure it's always in the same genre category. It's not this or nothing. It's this
Yeah.
or this,
So you said three is like the ideal number to have?
especially when you
Okay.
have services listed. So
Yeah.
you'll notice on a lot of the software websites,
Yeah.
they do this, right?
Yeah.
You can have like an ugly brother option, which is where it's the most expensive one that you know most people aren't going to want, but never put that up there if you're not willing to do it. Again, the ethics.
Yeah.
We always want to be ethical. So it's like, okay, here's my most expensive option. And knowing that maybe the first time someone works with you, that's not where they're probably headed. But if you use that first, it's the anchor, right? So they're
Mhm.
seeing, oh, this is $8,000 to have this
Yeah.
comprehensive thing for a whole year. And then maybe the middle one is the one that you wish they would do the most. And then a third option as well. So oftentimes we gravitate towards the middle option if there's
Yeah.
three listed. Be sure that each one of those options, though, are ones that you're willing to provide. You never want to have a fake one on there. People will see right through it anyways.
So I have a different business that I run outside of this one. And in that business, I have technically four now. I had three in the beginning, so maybe I'll drop down one. I even make the two boxes in the center, so there's four. So the two side ones are a little bit smaller. They're kind of
Mhm.
pushed back a little bit, the font's smaller. And then the
Mhm.
two in the middle, which is the two I want them to pick, is thicker lines. They're more bumped out. The font's bigger. They look like they have more stuff. Even though the funny thing is, the fourth one, which is my most expensive, you get everything in it. I don't want you to pick that one.
Mhm.
The funny thing is, I'll get people to pick it just because they'll just be like, I love you. I want you. I'm going to take that package. But
Yes.
most of the time, it's the two middle ones. And
Mhm.
so I love giving the option because some people are like, well, if I'm not ready for this or I don't want all of that, can I do it? And if you already have the option, it's really easy for them to self-identify.
Mhm. It sounds like you're intuitively already gravitating to a lot of what the research is showing. We call
Yeah.
that salience, right?
Okay.
So I do help people with their websites. I don't design websites
Yeah.
myself, but I can do an audit of your website and say, here's seven different ways you can increase conversions using psychological science.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is where you make it pop. It's more likely someone's going to click on something if it looks like a button than if it's just words, even if they're a different color. So having it dimensional, having it larger, like you said, looking like a button, something to click is pretty powerful. People underestimate how much those little things can add up to convergence.
Okay, so we're talking about having decision fatigue. I'm curious, as we're talking about scarcity and being
Mhm.
careful with that, what about having too much information on a page? Because I
Mhm.
don't know about everybody else. I'm tired of reading these pages that go on forever. I almost just want a blurb to be like, is this for me or not? I'll be like, chat, here's this website. I'm interested. Tell me what it's all about. Give me the three or four key things. Is this a new phenomenon going on, or has this always been us?
I think, and I don't know what the research says on this. So originally it was make sure you have some mid and long phrases that the search engine's going to find so that you can pop up. And so I think that was one motivation that drove people to have these longer websites because it's, well,
Yeah.
I got to get my SEO up. And now we've got, you want to pop up on AI. And to do that, it seems like you need even longer content and to have backlinks and all these other complicated things. And people get
Yeah.
overwhelmed and they're like, let me just throw it all on there. But the reality is, when a human hits, that is way too much. And so, Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize for economics, he was actually a behavioral economic professor. And so that basically means psychology plus money. And what he found is we have system one and we have system two. And 90 to 95% of our decisions are made on system one, which is our automatic, quick, intuitive system. And only about 5 to 10% of our decisions are based on system two, which is our analytical, effortful, slow system. And then everyone out there is like, yeah, but not me. Right? I think my things through. And so why is it that we all feel like that's
Yes. Because
totally
I was just thinking the same thing. I'm like, is she sure about 5%? Because I feel like I'm really analytical. There are stuff I've trained myself over the last 7 years to leap a little bit more so I
Mm.
can experience more because I'm all about learning and failing because the more experience, the more I learn. But I'm going to tell you, I feel like I think about a lot of this. So, yes.
There are definitely situations where we do the things that have lots of consequence and lots of impact, we're going to use too. But what we also found is that when we make a decision using system one, and then we go back and think about it, we add system two on top.
Yeah.
So let's say we made that purchase for a car, and really what drove us, and it's going to be complicated, but maybe the biggest factor was how the test drive felt, right? What kind of feel did this car give me? But when we go to tell someone else why we picked that car, or even when we think about it in our own head later on, we're like, well, because of this discount that we were given and this engine and this whatever. And so when we look back, we tend to place system two on top of the decision that was already made with system one. So that's another reason why it feels wrong. Like it can't be 90 to 95%.
That's interesting.
In reality, it probably is most of us.
Okay, so if I'm trying to sell to people online, so I'm trying to get people and I want to emotionally appeal to them. I then want to appeal to their system one. Is that, and that's the emotional side. Are there any cool little tips or tricks that we could do to kind of get more people to make that decision the right way?
Absolutely. So there's been a ton of research over the last 4, 5 decades on persuasion and influence. If there's only one person you're going to explore in this realm, it's Dr. Robert Cialdini. He is considered the godfather of influence. So basically, in the 70s and 80s, he was like, a lot of people are going around, and you have salespeople in pharmaceuticals, and you have salespeople in retail, and you have negotiators, all these people trying to persuade and influence, and they all emphasize how they're different. But he was like, I wonder how it's all the same. And so he kind of went undercover into a lot of these places and discovered 6 universal principles that all people who are trying to get others to say yes use. And then later on, he actually discovered a seventh one. So there are 7 key principles that research has supported over and over again that are across the board for everybody, no matter what culture, what age, gender, ethnicity, it doesn't matter. All of these are key to influencing others. And so when he looked at that, he has those 7 variables. But then on top of that, it was discovered later that they do different things. So the first thing you want to do when you want to activate system one and get that emotional connection with someone is to cultivate relationship. And that can be challenging online, right? As opposed to in person. So obviously in person, it only takes about 10 minutes to really get people to connect with you. By the way, if you're going to try to get that connection with someone, it would be ideal if on your call to action it was to have that conversation, right? If you can. Obviously, that's not always possible depending on what you're doing or what the person wants. What we discover is it is absolutely worth your time to spend that 10 to 15 minutes building rapport. But if you want to cultivate relationship, there are 3 of those principles that tie into that aspect of persuasion. And so the first one I would say you want to focus on is having people reciprocate. So doing something for the other person first. It's super important that you do it first. If you do it in return, it doesn't work at all. So people are often intuitively doing this. We have these ideas of lead magnets. I'm going to give you this awesome thing, then you'll feel obligated to me or be on my newsletter list. But there's some information that we want to pay attention to when we do reciprocity. There's some variables that you want to be careful with. So you may remember, or maybe some people are too young to know this, but in the mid 80s, there was a huge crisis in Ethiopia where there was not enough food and hundreds of thousands of people were starving to death. And so this got in the news, of course. Folks were doing all kinds of fundraisers and those kinds of things. And so Ethiopia was kind of the center of the mid 80s of getting assistance and raising funds. But what was interesting is that Mexico had a really bad earthquake at the same time all this was going on in Ethiopia. And it came out that folks in Ethiopia actually sent $5,000 to Mexico once they had the earthquake. And everyone was asking them, why would you do that when your people are starving? You don't have a dime to spare. And they're like, well, it's really important to us because we feel like we owe Mexico. Because back in the 1930s, there were issues going on in Ethiopia with Mussolini and Italy coming back to reinvade Ethiopia. And Mexico sent resources to help support them in their battle against fascism. And even though it wasn't the same people, this is generations later, the society felt like they owed it to Mexico to help them out because they had been helped 50 years earlier. So when people look at this, they're just like, what? This is crazy that they had such a dire need themselves and they were willing to give even in those desperate times. And so that's one of the historical studies that really show the power of this, that it's for the individual, but it can also be for your community. So sometimes reciprocity cannot just be that you gave the individual something, but maybe that you're seen doing things for the community that they live in or the people that they're connected to. So maybe you do some work with a nonprofit and then you put that on your Insta, and that now can activate reciprocity, even though it wasn't for that explicit individual, but it's for their people or for my community. So reciprocity isn't always as simple as you might think it is. So much cool research out there on this are the intangibles.
Okay.
So it doesn't always have to be a physical thing. Sometimes there are intangibles that can be really valuable to others. So, for example, let's say as a real estate agent, you're working with a client, and obviously you're not getting paid unless the sale goes through, right? And one way to keep someone connected with you is to bring to top of mind the things that you've already invested in them, even if it's not financial. So I'm so glad that we had this half-hour conversation or 1 hour conversation. I am going to go and do A, B, and C for you. Bring it to top of mind at the end of the conversation. Here's what I've done. Here's what I'm going to continue to do to keep that relationship going. Because after the contract's over, if you haven't sold yet, are they going to switch to someone else?
Yeah.
And so bringing top of mind, even those things that are intangibles that you've done for that person can be really valuable. And when someone thanks you, that's another opportunity. So someone says, thank you for doing this for me. And instead of saying, oh, no problem, no worries, no big deal, you have just erased this excellent moment where you had to build reciprocity with someone. So instead, say something like, of course, that's what partners do for each other. That is so much more powerful. It activates this relationship of back and forth.
And I like you mentioned that because I have a really hard time with thank you. I think it's still some internal work I have to do because when people are like, oh my God, thank you so much. That was just amazing. It just changed everything. I'm like, don't even think about it. It's not a big deal. But I love it where you're like, say, of course, that's what partners do. Hey, I'm always here to help you. Thank you for inviting me.
Mhm.
I like that so much better. I had a question actually about the intangibles. So then the intangibles would be like time, commitment. Let's say in the coaching world, maybe you gave them a free 10-minute coaching call, or would it be something like that where you just remind them and say, yeah, after we spent these 10 minutes together for free, you can see what it might be like. Is that what you like? Is that what you're talking about with the intangibles? Okay.
Yeah, and it could be also if it's not in person, You could even talk about, spent some time putting this proposal together for you,
Okay.
right? But you have to be careful with it. You don't
Yes.
want it to be super on the
Yeah.
nose, like I did this for you.
That's why I was asking because it can almost sound like, "Oh, I did all this. Come on. Like, why aren't you
Hmm.
doing this now?"
Yeah.
And I know that's not what we're talking about. That's why I
Hmm.
wanted to get a little more clarity. I think it's just one of those in the moments. I think it should feel alignment and good. So it should be more this way I'm perceiving it. It should be more of a, I was appreciative of your time as you are of my time.
Hmm.
And I'm just going to highlight. I'll do at the end of a sales meeting, right? I try to close people because that's what you do in a sales meeting.
Hmm.
But a lot of times, what I will say is like recap the deep conversation, what they're really looking for, right? And then at the end, I'll say, so remember, this is what you were looking for and what you were really needing. That's our next steps together. That's what we're going
Hmm.
to work on together because we already identified it now. So maybe it's not the same thing, but it's the line down that
Yeah,
line.
absolutely.
Okay.
And I think too, when you're bringing to top of mind what you've already done, it can just be half a sentence. It could be part of a discussion, or it could just be, here it is, right? Here's
Yep.
this phrase at the beginning. And so then
And
the
then you
second
move.
half of
Okay.
the sentence, obviously, if you've spent a lot of time, it might be a larger summary, like you're
Of
saying,
course.
you're
Yeah.
spending a whole hour spending time with someone. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so we have the one already, and then what's the second one?
So the second one I'd like to talk about is unity.
Okay.
And sometimes people get this confused with social proof. So social proof is other people are recommending you. And that
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely important, but it's not for building relationship. That works in a totally different way. So social proof is more about getting the backing of others or opinions of others to make your decision. And that works on a whole different system in your brain, which is
Okay.
reducing uncertainty. And so when you want to build relationship, you actually want to try unity first before you can put on your website, of course, social proof, and it's smart to do
Yeah.
so at the very top. But when you're connecting with someone, especially in person, you probably want to access unity first. And so how unity is different than social proof. Social proof, again, is like what other people say, how many stars you have, what's on Trustpilot.
Yeah.
But unity is bringing the connection with the person where you're getting people to say yes because you belong to the same group they do. And so that group could be a lot of different things, right? I mean, obviously, we all have our variations and differences, but finding the similarities is so much more important.
Let me
So,
ask you a question. I'm actually building this. So I have the House of Cortesa, which is my private society. And the reason I'm building this is because I feel like I'm hunting for my people like a needle in a haystack, where
mm,
I'm struggling to find them. I'm somebody who wants an environment that flexes with me because I move really fast, but sometimes I have to move slow. I'm also a biohacker. I'm big on my health and my body, my nervous system,
mm,
because I destroyed it. So I've spent all these years really working to build it back up. And so I like this idea because I'm taking the hay away, I'm putting all the needles in a pile, and I'm telling the women, if you have a business, you have consistent sales, you want to invest in your body and yourself, and you want to live a life of fulfillment and of purpose and let the business fund it instead of stressing about the business, then come here. I would
I
love to
love
get,
it.
okay. I was like, I'd love to get more of this unity thing because
Hmm.
this is to me what women need more than anything.
Hmm.
This is what we're all lacking.
And I think you bring up a good point that all humans need to feel unity with others. But I think there's quite a bit of research out there to show that women maybe function even on a higher level with this, right? That
Yeah.
maybe our need is a little larger for social connection. When we look at the research on when women talk, a lot of people believe that women talk more than men. This is a common misconception out there. But the reality is, women don't speak more than men in general. And especially in the professional environment, men
Hmm.
actually speak more than
Yeah.
women. But what's interesting about the gender difference is what men use their words for and what women use their words for. And what we tend to see is that women are going to talk to connect more than men, and that men are more often using their words to try to get a point across or to convey something. And of course, both do both of those
Yeah.
things, just in percentages, right? So I
Yep.
think you make a really good point that, especially with a female group, that unity is going to be possibly even more important,
Yeah.
even though it's universal for all. Yeah. So with unity, it's kind of interesting how you bring this to mind. So I'm going to throw out another history story, if that's okay.
Yeah, I love history. I'm like a huge history person because I'm the biggest believer that history repeats
Mm,
and you either learn from the lesson or you suffer from the lesson. And
yeah.
so I love to hear the stories. I love to analyze them. And I like how you're putting the two of them together, which is really cool.
So a lot of people are not aware that in the 1930s in Japan, authoritarianism had risen in Japan, that there was actually a Jewish community there. A lot
Hmm.
of people are unaware of this. It doesn't seem to fit our framework. We think mostly Europe, right, in the
Yeah.
United States. And so what was interesting is, as a lot of people probably already remember, Germany and Japan became allies. And so Germany, of course, was reaching out to its allies to try to target Jewish community members, obviously for horrible
Hmm.
reasons, right?
Yeah.
And so basically, the Germans took one of their guys that was really high up, and he said, "Let me go and meet with the head of the land forces and of the Air Force and of the Navy of Japan. And let me convince them," because they were kind of the powers at the time. There was an emperor, but he wasn't really. The real power was with the military. So they're like, let me find the influential people, which of course is smart if you want to be persuasive.
Yes.
Who has the power? That's who you go to, not the figurehead, right? So that was made sense that they went to those folks. But what was interesting is what those leaders did. So they definitely spent time with their ally, as that you would expect, and listened to their side of it. But then they reached out to two rabbis to get the other side of the story, which I thought was really interesting, that they didn't just take the word of one side. And so they reach out to these two rabbis, and one rabbi spends a lot of time hitting system two, right? He
Yeah.
talks about all the things that the Jewish community has done for Japan, specifically, contributions they made to the community and those kind of things. The other rabbi worked on system one, and this is where the real impact was. And so when the second rabbi talks, he basically just says one thing, right? And he says, "You should stay committed to us because we are Asian and we are we." Right? And this idea of we-ness, which
Yes.
sounds kind of weird, but this idea of unity, that we are one, that we are the
Yep.
same people, is what saved tens of thousands of Jewish people's lives in Japan. Just that's when they made the decision that no, we're not going to turn these folks over to the Germans. And so sometimes we tend to focus on our differences. You could have easily focused on religious differences or even, belief systems or anything like that, but instead that person accessed the commonality.
I think the we is so important. And in a situation like that, it's crazy to think one little phrase,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yep.
I literally wrote down like activating system one is where the real impact is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And then you can always layer system two with
Yeah.
that, right? But you want to pull them in with the system one first,
Yeah.
and then system two, you give them the system two to justify it afterwards.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we can apply this in a lot of different ways with even not just with sales or clients, but also with employees. If you have any employees, a big factor with this is co-creation. So you can do this with your clients and you can do this with your employees. So if there's a way that you can ask, let's say you sell a product and maybe you have a competition where people's kids draw pictures and whoever wins gets to put it on the cover of the
Yeah.
item or on the magazine or whatever. Or maybe it's, we'd love to hear your ideas. What do you think the next product should be? And they get to vote, right? And they get to pick which one. But then you have to actually be willing do whatever the people say, right? You can't be like, well, you guys voted for this, but we're going to do this instead. So be careful with those, that be sure that all the options you give them, that you're willing to take. And with employees, same thing, right? If there's a team that you involve in the decision, when you own it, it's our decision, and you get so much more buy-in the further steps down the path. So their motivation, they tend to have higher productivity if they had some kind of say in what their work will be. So this is huge in psychology. Anytime you can give people some autonomy, some input that's actually valued, which is another thing you have to be careful of.
Yeah.
Don't ask for feedback if you
If you
don't
don't.
want it. Yeah, if you're going to do what you're going to do anyway, that
Yeah.
backfires worse
All
than
the
if you
time.
hadn't asked in the first place.
Yes. I love it.
One other thing I'd say about that, the way you phrase it can be important too. So if you do want input from someone, wording matters. Let me ask you, what do you think of these three things? If you were going to ask someone for some input, would you use the word, can you give me your opinion? Can you give me feedback? Or can you give me advice? Which one of those do you think you'd get the most positive information back with?
Ooh, I would probably go with advice. I like the word advice as a branding, my background in branding and strategy.
Mhm.
Advice is the one I'd go. If you feel like you're getting a lot of reviews of people not liking something and they're struggling, then I would ask for feedback because feedback means that you're going to fix something
Mm.
versus just someone saying, here's an option. So I think it depends, but I lean towards advice.
You are correct.
I won a prize.
The research shows that you have a better instinct than I did at first, because I thought maybe feedback would be the best word, because somehow in my head I'm thinking that's kind of neutral. You get positive and negative from feedback, but somehow it isn't. It does lean negative, like you said,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so an opinion, it sounds really probably pretty strongly negative.
Yeah.
Feedback feels a little less so, but it still leans that way.
Yep.
And then asking for advice, now they're with you. We got that we-ness going on as well, right? We got that
Yes.
unity. We're pulling in together to solve this rather than a critic.
Yeah, and advice, when someone asks for advice, the way they ask it, when they use that word, it's I'm open, I'm
Mm.
willing, let's have a conversation. So it's how the words land. And of course, different cultures, the words can mean different things.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'm really big at looking. So when I use words, I'm really careful to think how they're going to be perceived when someone sees it. And what's the point of the conversation? Like, am I trying to be stern? Am I trying to be nice? Am I being open and people to come in? But the words matter so much.
I absolutely agree. And there's so many ways that this relates to in person and online too, right? Like how you're doing things online, how you
Yeah.
phrase things. So,
How you even write your copy makes a difference, which a
mm,
lot of people don't understand. Like you could say, I sold $1 million in sales in 9 years, or I sold $1 million in sales in just 9 years.
mhm.
Like just adding the just makes a difference because it's not just 9 years. Now it's wow, it's 9 years. That's crazy. Other people must not do it in 9 years, right? So
Mhm.
I love all that.
You're bringing up another point
Yeah.
too, which kind of threads through the seven principles, which is contrast.
Okay.
And so using that contrast, that word just is like ooh, but something more powerful is coming right after this word, right?
Yes.
So anytime you can do contrast for sure. So the third one for developing a relationship, which everyone's going to be like, oh yeah, of course, but there's so much more to it, is liking. The person needs to feel like you are someone they want to be around, that they like you before they're willing to even move forward after. So, between these three things, you're building connection and you're finding unity and you're likable. And I have to say, as women, this can be tricky.
Yes.
So, there's the universal principles, and then there's gender issues within each principle. And I would say liking is probably the top one where gender difference is impactful, because women in professional circles want to be seen as competent and assertive as well as likable. And that is a tightrope walk for women, where for men it tends to be a wider berth given to lean towards assertive. And then if you lean too far into likable and we use all those soft words that we
Yeah.
use, then we lose our power. And then we're seen as kind and gentle, but not necessarily capable.
Women can be harsh to women. And it doesn't matter if you're in a business setting or just a friend setting. We always feel like we're fighting for that positioning
Mhm.
where I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like men are like, yeah, whatever. They don't care. The way I see from history, way back cavemen days, is that men would go hunting. It was a solo thing. It was a quiet thing. The women would keep the babies, the children, maybe go get some vegetables or whatever. It's more of the soft stuff. We needed that community. We needed each other. We were together. We talked more. But I think our relationship where we stood was different. And so today, it's really hard to be likable. And I struggle a lot too when I'm in certain social groups because it's if I say something too powerful, I just stepped on those three women's feet and they're not going to like me and they're going to push me
Mhm.
down because I just stepped on them. But if I don't speak up, then I'm too passive. And to be honest, I just want to be myself. I just want to be who I am and enjoy life. And I'm tired of being in groups where I speak up and I say something and then it's, oh, you can't, or you bring, I love it where you bring a dish to a party and the other person who comes all the time brings that dish. And it's like, how could you bring that dish? It's like, I didn't know they were going to bring it. Like, I didn't know that. Why am I getting yelled at for it? I just think it's the funniest thing in the world.
I think it is interesting. Some people would assume that women are more supportive of women in the workplace, but the
No.
research doesn't always bear that out. And so there's something called a she-peat. Are you familiar with
No.
this? And so when in a larger meeting with both genders, what often can be helpful, because women are not deemed likable if they toot their own horn. We brag on ourselves. That is less acceptable than if a man does it. And so, what you can often do is have a network within your group to say, let's find ways to support each other in the meeting. So, what can happen is you get the male who, and this experience has happened to a lot of people, including myself, where you have said something and it kind of gets blown off.
Mhm.
And then a male says the same thing, but in different words. And everyone's like, that's a great
Oh, they're
idea.
like, this is,
Yeah.
well, that's really good. And you're sitting there going, I just said that two
So
minutes
yeah,
ago.
so a he-peat, right? Like a
Yeah.
repeat by the guy. But what if we turn that and we do it with females, but instead it's that our colleague, who also happens to be female, says that's a great idea and validates because you see that no one else is kind of jumping on board with the idea that you thought was a good idea. Instead of being hesitant and kind of waiting to feel the room, just jump in there and be like, that was a great idea, and then expand. Maybe it could go this way or whatever it might be. So having a she peat instead of the he peat where that person owns it, you're validating and saying, I agree with so and so,
Yeah.
and add your aspect to it. So
I
that
love that.
makes that person more likable. It also makes you more likable, not just to the person that you validated, but also to others around you because they see that you're a team player. So that increases liking for both.
I was interviewing someone on my podcast, and she does mainly with the corporate world. And she called it more like a sponsorship. And the women as a group sit together and they sponsor each other so that it's not just going to the men or they're forgotten. Because a lot of times in the corporate world, the women, like we talked about, don't speak up. They're afraid to say something. So they get passed over for a lot of stuff. So this way it helps bring them to light and be seen.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think that's a key element, that we're not just doing this to elevate each other, but that we actually generally like their ideas, right?
Yes.
And it's that we're not always as verbal. Again, women speak less in professional meetings
Yeah.
than men do. We tend to hold it in a little too much, and we have to let that go. Not that we're artificially rising each other, but we're actually doing what already existed that we just were not communicating.
So we have building relationships, and it's the three
Mhm.
different steps, correct? Okay.
So that's the third one, is liking. And I just want to throw out one more thing with that,
Yeah.
which is giving compliments that are genuine is so powerful. And a lot of us use it, but maybe not in the moments when we could most benefit from it. So if you're having a discussion where you have to make a decision as a team, make sure
Yeah.
when you do the compliments that they're within the time frame of when it has the impact, or you miss the impact of what that compliment can do to improve getting people to say yes to your ideas and to your sales.
I have a question about that actually, because with compliments, sometimes, and I hear it, like my sister will do it, and I have friends who'll do it, and then I'll stop and I'll be like, was that a compliment or was that an insult wrapped in a compliment?
Mm,
A lot of times with women, they'll be like, oh, you can wear that dress. Oh, that's nice. And you're like, is it a bad dress? Should I not be wearing it? Maybe it's me, but I have a really hard time sometimes when people say stuff like that to me because I'm like, are they insulting me? Am I having issues recognizing this? So when I give compliments, I have a really hard time too because I don't want it to sound like that because I've perceived that. So
mhm.
any takes on that?
I wonder, as women, we all read as children that we have that
Yeah.
tight walk. And so we tend to be more positive, maybe, and a little less blunt sometimes. But I wonder, for me at least, when I give a compliment, I try to make sure I communicate why I like the thing. So not just like, oh, I love your dress, but I love your dress. It makes you look brighter
Right.
or something. Like add the whatever, even if it's just something as small as that, or in a more complex way when you're in the meeting with someone. I love that idea because
Yeah.
so that is no longer questionable. Because I
Yeah.
totally understand what you're
Yeah.
saying, where you're like, was that a, oh, bless your heart kind of Southern thing?
Right. I had a lady because I just moved to the South now. So I'm from California. I live in Tennessee. And I went to the house and one of my boys' friends, and she was talking to me and she was like, oh, bless your heart. And she's like, oh, that's not meant in the mean Southern way. And I was like, there's two ways to say bless your heart. I'm like, dear God, I'm in trouble. Compliments are a hard one. I feel like we need to do it more. I call it more gratitude. If something comes up, someone gave me a great idea. I'm like, I just want to say thank you. That was really a great idea. And it just opened my eyes on to this concept or whatever it is. I try to let them know that it was insightful because I know when people tell me that I changed them, it makes me feel good. It makes
Mhm.
me feel happy because the whole point of everything I'm doing is to find more joy in life, to feel fulfilled, and success will come later. But if you're not happy and you're not fulfilled, success will eat you alive. So that's the way I look at
Absolutely.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a good point that a lot of these things actually, for example, when we talked about reciprocity and you give first,
Yeah.
I think most of us are aware that who has more joy from that moment? The person who gives, right?
Yeah.
When you give compliments, it not only affects that person, it affects you and probably magnifies. When we're aware of this, but sometimes we kind of forget it, right?
Yeah.
How this can spread and make a better experience in that meeting or that meeting with the client, the whole tone shifts and
Yeah.
it's huge.
Yeah. And I could see someone using all of these doing a live masterclass and they're talking about their offer. Too many times on the master classes, they don't want people talking because they want their rhythm, but I'm changing it around. For the people who want to come into my private society, the House of Cortesa, I have an informational session. And I'm actually going to be asking questions and having conversations. And I'm going to be giving compliments and saying thank you because the whole point is I'm building unity. I want to show them the unity before they even get into the house, right?
Mhm.
I want to show them what it's like by learning and being with me, not just I'm going to do a presentation, be quiet and listen, right? So I'm
Exactly.
already showing them that we're already different than everything else out there.
And another aspect with the co-creation, right? Can we customize what we offer people? So
Yeah.
if we communicate that customization that we've heard you, and now we're
Yep.
going to act and respond to what you've said and fit it for you, how much more
Yeah.
powerful that is.
I love that.
It's all about putting it into habits, right? And
Correct.
maybe the subtle things about the way you word it or the time you do it. In my trainings, a lot of times that's a big focus is how do you activate this? And let's take our biggest influence challenge and do that system two to it, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
actually analyze it all and play this out, get that practice down, and then it becomes automatic. So, yeah, we've talked about cultivating relationship. And the other two areas you really want to focus on are reducing uncertainty. So when you want someone to say yes, once you have that relationship built, there still may be some uncertainty about your ability or what you can do for them, even though they like you. So we all have that friend that we like that wants us to do something that we're like, yeah, that's not going to go well. So how do we reduce that uncertainty? And that's where two of the other principles fit in: social proof, which we referred to a little bit already, what the opinion of others are, and authority. Do you have someone you can lean on that's an expert that feeds into what you do? And those two are super important to reduce the uncertainty when they get to that point. And then they have this relationship with you. They're no longer uncertain, but still sometimes we need to motivate action, where some people kind of get in that stuck decision paralysis situation. And to get them out of that, to motivate action, there's the two principles. One we referred to was scarcity and commitment. And so getting micro commitments can be really important to move that person towards action. So basically baby steps, right? We can do this online. So I help some people make their website fit these principles better. And one of them is those +1 options with that smaller, softer CTA and when to have that so that you get that smaller commitment. And then you provide more reciprocity. They're in your newsletter and you give them more information and you support them more. And then now you do the hard CTA, right? You're asking for that bigger thing, the thing that you really want to support them with. And so the commitment thing can be really small to start off with, and then it grows, right? And I'm sure a lot of people are already doing these kinds of things, but sometimes we just kind of forget to apply it to all the situations it could work for.
Yeah. And then in terms of the commitment, I love the micro commitments. I hear a lot about that. So those are as simple as someone just saying yes when you're saying something. So I know a lot of speakers will say, they'll talk about something and they'll literally say yes. And then you hear the crowd, they just auto reply, yes.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, because
Yeah.
it gets your brain to then register, okay, you need to do this. Yes, we're
Hmm.
all doing it because I said yes. Is that
Yeah.
what you're talking about? Like the little ones?
Yes, but I do think you have to be careful with it
Okay.
because it depends on your audience and you kind of have to feel where they're at, right? And so how big or small do you go with that commitment?
Yeah.
I work with a group of people where a lot of the folks are from Europe and Asia.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't understand why American speakers always try to get people to clap for no reason. And they're like, it's so disingenuous. Even though commitment is universal, the way you go about it might need to be matched to your audience. Another way to go about it is to think about how you can get commitment, maybe breaking people up if you have a workshop or something into small groups. And how is it that they can start exploring the idea? So now that they're doing that co-creation, right? They're thinking, how does this apply to me? That actually can then lead to some commitment because a lot of these principles kind of network together and feed off of each other. So when you can do that, all the better. The more principles, the better every time.
I love it. I love it so much. As we're nearing the end of this podcast, it was like, I think I could talk to you about this stuff all day long. Let's talk about how people can find you and where they can follow you.
Absolutely. So I'm primarily posting in LinkedIn.
Okay.
So my company is called Vulcan Consulting. My image, I don't know if you can see the image behind my logo.
Yeah.
I made that wet felting. I don't know if
Okay.
there's any crafting nerds out there, but I do love a good craft. All my handles on Insta, Facebook, and LinkedIn are Vulcan Consult. Also, my website, of course, is vulcanconsult.com. I am starting a new series that's going to dive deep into each one of these principles. So I'm really excited about that. It will take several months because there's so much content, but I'm really looking forward to doing that for everyone to help them be successful. And my passion really is that we do this in an ethical way. So I really appreciate you emphasizing that today because
Yeah.
we want to make sure that we're being authentic to the people that we work with and serve.
It's just one of those things that one, it makes you happier in life. And two, you don't want things shut down. You don't
Mhm.
want to get something banned or shut down. And you're like, that was my livelihood. And now I can't do it because I was doing something a little shady. It's just do it right. And I
Mhm.
promise you, as time goes on, you'll grow faster and faster than doing it wrong. So that's just the way I
Absolutely.
perceived it. Yeah, yes. And everybody, we will be putting the links to how to connect with Laura down below if you're watching here in YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast channel, it'll be in the show notes. Make sure to check her out. I took pages and pages of notes. There is such great information here, and we couldn't even get to everything we wanted to talk about. So much good stuff. So check her out, follow her on LinkedIn, connect with her. If you're interested in working with her, reach out, have a conversation, and let's just start making everything better. Laura, thank you so much for joining
Thank you.
me today. I really appreciate having you on.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful talking with you.
Same here.